We will begin with the latest event that took place in Jerusalem. The JNS, which is a news agency, Jewish News Syndicate, had an international policy summit in Jerusalem. It included almost everyone who supports genocide in Israel and a couple of people from around the world. There was a very anxious woman who also made a speech in that conference, and it's been taking place for 2 days now. They like to talk a lot, these people. But yesterday, Benjamin Netanyahu had a speech during which he was talking about all of the developments and updates that are happening at the moment, and Israel's future in the region, what's going to happen now. Some of the highlights of Benjamin Netanyahu in that conference were the Palestinian issue, the ongoing conflict, Iran, Israel's objectives in Gaza, and the future of the state of Israel in relation to the security control. Now, in relation to Palestine, Benjamin Netanyahu again showed his outright refusal for a Palestinian state. He said that the idea that establishing a Palestinian state that would lead to peace is folly, saying nothing more than a folly, he said. We don't want the Palestinian Authority of the West Bank, and we don't want Hamas in Gaza. And his rationale in relation to this is the fact that, well, Hamas are outright saying they want to eliminate the state of Israel, but the Palestinian Authority of the West Bank, they're saying that we want to have a state first, and then we want to destroy the state of Israel. So the Palestinian Authority is hiding the fact that they want to eliminate the state of Israel. So again, Benjamin Netanyahu, he doesn't want any Palestinian state doesn't matter who's running it. He doesn't want the Palestinian Authority. He doesn't want Hamas. Nothing in the West Bank, nothing in Gaza. And he's saying that he wants to have full security control. Now, he continued to say that Iran is, of course, the major threat in the region, leading all of these problems, and that Iran should be stopped. It shouldn't have any nuclear capabilities. As a matter of fact, it should be stripped of any capabilities to enrich uranium, according to Benjamin Netanyahu, and they need to be stopped. Now, Benjamin Netanyahu is, of course, a man who wants war with Iran, but he knows very well that he can't go to war with Iran unless he's fully backed by the United States. Now, clearly, the United States isn't fully backing at the moment the idea of an all-out war with Iran. As a matter of fact, they are talking. They're talking. He continued to say that one of the main objectives is to have total security, saying that Israel will have the security control in the region, in Palestine, and Israel wants to dictate all of the security situation in the region. These were the highlights that came from Benjamin Netanyahu. There were others, of course, who had their statements in this event, and one of them actually made a very interesting statement. In the JNS conference, and this was the statement. Listen to this.
A majority of Gen Z have an unfavorable impression of Israel. And my friends, I think the reason for that is that we're losing the digital war. Okay, they're getting their information from TikTok and whatever it is, and we're losing that war. When you think about it, the masters of the universe are Jews. We've got Altman and AI, we got Zuckerberg, we got Sergey Brin, we got the whole group across the board. Jan Combs, founded WhatsApp. It's us, and we have to figure out a way to win the digital battle. Amelia, we got to get our digital sneakers on so that the truth can prevail over the lies. And when we do that, the future of Israel will be stronger because a majority of all Americans will support Israel. We'll make that happen. We have to make it happen. Thank you. Baruch Hashem. Thanks.
Jews are the masters of the universe. That was previous US Senator Norm Coleman. Of course, he's leading an Israeli Republican line, saying that we're the masters of the universe, but we're doing a bad job on social media and TikTok, and we're losing the battle. Of course, you're losing the battle. I mean, any battle that requires some elements or has any elements of truth, you'll lose in that battle, because your way of portraying things is in the dark, in propaganda, publishing propaganda and lies. Israel was established on deception and a pseudo history, created this new fake nationality, and they're continuing to operate in the dark, trying to shut down everyone who opposes them. This is how they operate. So, of course, if there's any kind of freedom or liberty or, any sort of independence in delivering news or updates from what's happening on the ground, of course Israel will lose. And thankfully, he's admitting that. And guess what? There's no hope that they would win. And listen, Israel and the Israeli lobby, they spend billions upon billions. Of course, apart from corporate media and your politicians and your leaders too, and your senior members and ministers in the government, they try with social media and they try with all social media networks. And they sometimes pretend to be, alternative media or new accounts on YouTube and TikTok and X and what have you. But unfortunately, it doesn't work. It doesn't work. However, this clearly shows people, and it's very important for people to know that they don't stop, that they do not stop, and therefore the responsibility on everyone who is spreading the truth, the real situation, the reality of these people and what's happening on the ground. This role is very important, and this role is crucial and should continue every single day, because if the other side was posting what's happening on the ground, if they stop for 1 second, these people don't stop. Conferences, billions, people, recruiting, money, everything, they continue. And of course, he's surprised because, according to him, Jews are the masters of the universe. Talk about conspiracy theories, right? They always talk about conspiracy theories. And this guy in the JNS conference in Jerusalem saying, we are the master. We are the masters of the universe. Was that a conspiracy theory, or was it something that he shouldn't have said? Anyway, it was an interesting summit. It's still going on, the summit, JNS summit, including genocide supporters from all over the planet. Well, some parts of the planet, to be fair. And there was another statement, ladies and gentlemen, and that statement came today. That statement came today from someone who is the top aide of Benjamin Netanyahu. As a matter of fact, the man who was appointed by Benjamin Netanyahu to lead the delegation for the negotiations. He is none other than the Minister of Strategic Affairs in Israel. And like I said, Netanyahu's number one aide, Ron Dermer. What did Ron Dermer say? Ron Dermer said, within 12 months, the war will end and Israel will win. Okay, forget about the second part. But let's take the first part. Within 12 months, the war will end. Why is Ron Dermer, the man who is supposed to play by the timeline of Benjamin Netanyahu, constantly delay? He was criticized by the families of the prisoners of war many times, saying that the man constantly delays, he has no action plan. Why is he saying that the war will end within 12 months now? Something is happening. A decision has been made. And if there is any pressure, then it's now. That pressure is happening now from the United States administration, but that's also not disconnected or detached from the reality on the ground in Israel. Ron Dermer is saying within 12 months, meaning it could happen anytime from now up until 12 months. However, others in Israel, top figures in Israel, are saying that Benjamin Netanyahu actually wants to end the war up until October. We'll get to that in a second. But before we get to that, why are they saying within 12 months and October, and what does that mean? They're clearly preparing the ground for a ceasefire that could begin. It potentially wouldn't be declared as an all-out ceasefire. However, it will eventually lead to the end of the war. This is something that Benjamin Netanyahu and everyone close to Benjamin Netanyahu used to refrain from quoting, refrain from saying. Now, this official is quoted as a senior security official in the state of Israel. This was also published by Israel Hayom, saying that this is Netanyahu's deadline to end the war. And according to him, that deadline is October this year, not October 2026, meaning that the Benjamin Netanyahu doesn't have more than 2 years in total to end this. And the quote coming from the security official is saying that Netanyahu believes that this is the maximum target date, and he believes that 2 years is the maximum time that Israel can go with this war, with this genocide in Gaza. Clearly, something is happening behind closed doors, but we do know that certain things are happening on the ground too. Now, on the ground, we've been speaking about Israel and its losses in Gaza and the chaotic situation that the Israeli army is in. These things are being clear day after day, even clearer by the day. And now there has been certain developments by the Israeli army, being taken by the Israeli army, certain moves that are showing that, hold on a second, there are certain problems here. Why? Well, for the first time, this was published in multiple locations in Israel. For the first time, Israel is using a rocket. They had this report in a couple of places in Israel, saying that the IDF carried out the first operational use of Bar rocket. Israel using rockets. I mean, in diameter, they're probably smaller than the Palestinian resistance, but according to Israel, this rocket is very accurate. This rocket is very accurate. It's suitable for the use, especially in Gaza, in a challenging environment. It reduces the risk of civilian casualties. These people, they care a lot about civilian casualties, of course. But let's be serious. Why is Israel using a rocket? Israel is using a rocket for the first time since the genocide in Gaza, means that something's wrong with the Air Force. No one can convince us otherwise. Israel has been fully reliant on the Air Force. What's happening with the Air Force? Well, the Israeli Air Force, you have had many problems, especially in the past couple of months, that have escalated in the past few days, with outright statements coming from pilots in the Israeli army criticizing how things are being conducted and criticizing the operations that they've been given. We've had the letter from several weeks back that the Israeli pilots started, showing outright refusal to continue, blaming Netanyahu of leading a selfish campaign inside of the Gaza Strip for his own interest. And the latest statement spoke about, more civilian casualties than they were advised. They were stating that they were given information and orders to carry out strikes inside of the Gaza Strip without necessarily having civilian casualties. But then when they go and read the news, they see so many innocent people being killed. Therefore, they started to refuse. There could also be a problem with arms. That's another prospect, despite the fact that the United States has been sending Israel more and more arms lately. That could be another problem. However, Israel resorting to rockets to send to Gaza means that there is trouble with the standard equipment that Israel uses, whether when it comes to the Air Force, the Israeli pilots refusing to serve, the arms when it comes to the Israeli Air Force, or any other things preventing Israel from carrying out strikes with their Air Force. And at the end of the day, the Israeli claim that these rockets are like more accurate than the Israeli Air Force, I mean, that's very questionable. At the end of the day, the Israeli Air Force, they have the capability to carry out very accurate strikes. And that's another thing that proves how guilty they are, by the way, by targeting so many innocent civilians in Gaza. Because if Israel wants to carry out targeted assassinations, they can, like the targeted assassinations in Iran and in other locations too. When they want to kill one individual, they can kill them without necessarily having too much damage surrounding them. But the campaign in Gaza is, of course, a deliberate genocide, deliberate destruction. Therefore, they were landing bombs left, right, and center. So that's a problem. There's a problem with the Israeli army people refusing to serve, problems with the Israeli Air Force, and now they're reaching a stage where they're using rockets for the first time ever. All of this is coming simultaneously with the reports that the war is going to end within 12 months, and then another official talking about Benjamin Netanyahu having a deadline in October, 2 years after the beginning of Al-Aqsa flood on the 7th of October, 2023, saying that Benjamin Netanyahu believes that 2 years is more than enough. And Netanyahu is not outright denying, by the way. Netanyahu is not denying any of that. Now, how is that also linked to developments internally? We've spoken about the calls for public disobedience from the previous IDF, from the previous head of the Shin Bet. We spoke about the previous IDF chief of staff calling Benjamin Netanyahu an immediate and tangible threat to the security of the state of Israel. More and more Israelis now are saying that it's impossible to defeat the Hamas. And the IDF chief of staff, he actually came up with a plan to expand the operation in Gaza. So he was asked by the political echelon in Israel, led by, of course, Smotrich and co., because they want to expand, they want to control Gaza, they want to annex Gaza. They told the IDF chief of staff, come on, present us with a plan to expand the operations. This is not enough what's happening now. We need to have a greater war in Gaza. So he came up with a plan. But that plan was more worrying than it was reassuring. And according to reports in Israel, it was a horror scenario. Zamir presented a horror scenario about reoccupying Gaza. And then a political source they're quoting here is trying to scare, saying IDF is again trying to scare who? The political leadership inside of the state of Israel. Why? Because the IDF doesn't want to expand the operation in Gaza. As a matter of fact, the IDF isn't capable of expanding the operation in Gaza. They pretend like they can and want to expand the operation in Gaza, part of their overall psychological warfare. But really and truly, they can't expand it. Now, Zamir, who is the head of the IDF, is of course explaining that based on certain facts. He's saying that if we want to expand the operations in the Gaza Strip, we will have very many casualties. We will have plenty of casualties, lots of deaths, similar to the same numbers we used to have in the beginning of the genocide. Now, the political leadership is saying, no, this man is a liar. Why? Because Hamas have been hit. They are no longer capable. They don't have the same capabilities as they did since the beginning. And now we can actually add more pressure on them and have tangible results inside of the Gaza Strip. On the other side, though, the IDF themselves, they know exactly what's happening. Firstly, they're seeing massive numbers of shortages inside of the Gaza Strip. They need way more than what they currently have. They've been sending untrained people, late teens, to go and fight. Their parents were criticizing the government. They later on had to send them back, withdrew them from Gaza. They're desperate to try and get more people in. That clearly didn't work. The Orthodox community in Israel and the Haredim are not interested in going. As a matter of fact, they call Zionism blasphemous and what have you. We'll die and we won't serve. We will flee in our masses and leave the state of Israel. So the man is telling them outright, if you want us to expand the operation, we're going to die. We're going to die, and there is no guarantee that we will be eliminating Hamas, by the way. That's another thing. So from the political leadership perspective, they're having another challenge now, another challenge in the form of the IDF chief of staff, and he's being criticized for that. The IDF chief of staff is being criticized by people who had a bit more faith in him. People who thought that he would potentially, have a bit more of a challenging approach to Benjamin Netanyahu, but clearly he isn't, and he is following as much as possible. Yet, despite that, he's having some challenges here and there, especially with this confirmation that, well, it's going to be hell if we expand the operations in Gaza. One of these people was Yitzhak Brik, a man who I quoted many times during this war in Israel. He had a very senior position in the Israeli army. He's saying that the IDF, first and foremost, is unable to defeat Hamas. They can't defeat Hamas because everywhere they go, Hamas will come out again. Israel is able to expand its operations in Gaza. They are able to reach more locations in Gaza. But according to him, you can't defeat Hamas. It's as simple as that. And many top figures in Israel said that from the beginning. As a matter of fact, ever since this genocide started, I've been speaking about the fact that Netanyahu wrote his own failed destiny by saying that one of the objectives or the first objective of the war is to eliminate Hamas. Why? Because Israel put that objective before and it failed. It failed in 2008 when Hamas was far less capable. It failed in 2012. It failed in 2014. 2021, they didn't even try at the time. Now they said again, of course, with the Gaza genocide, but 1.5 years on, the Palestinian resistance is still giving them severe blows, and Israel is now confirming. And according to Brik, he's telling the IDF chief of staff, you need to understand one thing, that if you operate based on the instructions that you're given by Netanyahu and Smotrich and co., they will put the blame on you. Why? Because, well, at the end of the day, if they want you out at one point, like they forced the previous IDF chief of staff out, they're going to put the blame on the Israeli army. They're never going to blame themselves, although they're the ones making the decisions. And they're the ones who are not listening to the security establishment, but they want to make the decisions. They don't want to listen to the security recommendations. And if the same organizations who go against what they advise them to do, as in go ahead with the orders despite them criticizing those orders, and fail, they will blame them. And that's the idea that Brik is telling him. If you keep following these people, you're going to be the one to blame. No one to blame but yourself. And that could potentially be why Zamir has been presenting or has presented this recent horror scenario about Israel expanding the genocide inside of the Gaza Strip and expanding its operations by saying that they will have the same levels of casualties as they did in the beginning. That's the second thing that I wanted to talk to you about. Then, moving on to the problems that Benjamin Netanyahu had with the head of the Shin Bet. Now, the head of the Shin Bet declared outright, I'm going to be ending my duties. So today, with the head of the Shin Bet, Ronen Bar, announced, I'm going to end my duties on June the 15th. As the head of the organization, I've taken responsibility. My love for my homeland, loyalty of the state are the basis of every decision I have made in my professional life, including tonight. The discussion is not about my personal affairs, but about the independence of the next heads of the Shin Bet. The clear line that distinguishes between trust and loyalty must be drawn. Why is he leaving now? And is that linked with the recent developments and the recent announcements and reports that the war is going to end. Did Ronen Bar have it or set as a condition to his resignation that Israel needs to finish the war or at least have a declaration? Could be. Why? Because, well, he previously said, I'm not going to resign and I have legal basis for my decision. And the Israeli Supreme Court supported him. The Israeli High Court said that he actually has valid, solid information and solid legal basis to continue in his position and not actually resign or not accept the resignation or the sacking that Benjamin Netanyahu tried to impose against him. Again, as part of Netanyahu's greater plan, Netanyahu applied pressure on the previous defense minister to resign and the IDF chief of staff. Many resignations in the IDF in the past 1.5 years. The previous members of the war cabinet also resigned back in June 2024 after Netanyahu continuously refused to reach a ceasefire agreement. And again, you're talking about previous IDF chiefs of staff, Benny Gantz and Gadi Eisenkot. Gadi Eisenkot lost his son and his nephew in Gaza, unlike Netanyahu, who hasn't even sent his son to the war. His son was in Miami and roaming around, enjoying beaches. So there could be a link there. Ronen Bar, he probably knew, or he was probably advised that, look, we will have a declaration, therefore you can resign if this is about to end. Does this mean that we're seeing an end in a few months or an end anytime soon? It could mean that. Why? Because for the first time, Israel is giving a deadline. Before, everything was open. If we go back to October 2023, Israel was talking about an endless war, as in 10-year war with Hamas. It's going to be very long, and we're not going to stop until we eliminate them, and we will continue up until they are eliminated and defeated, and we want to have security control over Gaza, and all of these statements that came from them. As time went by, 16 months into a full-blown barbaric genocide, now over 2 months, not getting one bit of aid into the Gaza Strip, no medicine, no nothing. The civilian suffering is tremendous in Gaza. Every day they massacre more and more people. Today, massacres of people trying to get flour and bread, including children. All of that as an attempt to force the Palestinian resistance to surrender. However, I mean, even if the Palestinian resistance wanted to surrender, there is no guarantee that Israel is going to stop any genocide. But the Palestinian resistance said multiple times that there is no way, we are continuing up until we end this. These statements that are coming from Israel now are showing that there is prospect to get to a deal, and that this deal could potentially look as a temporary deal in the beginning, but ultimately lead to the end of the war. Now, Israel is talking in broader terms too. For example, Ron Dermer was saying the 7-front war will end. Why is he saying the 7-front war will end too? Because Israel is at war with other countries as well, and all of the conflicts have been tied together. Of course, Gaza has been the main thing. Why? Because it started from Gaza. The biggest suffering is in Gaza. The genocide is in Gaza. But we've had Lebanon, we've had Yemen, we've had Iran. All of these changes are very important. And Israel is looking to take things down, but with having full control in terms of security. The Saudis previously declared that they are willing to have an agreement with Israel if there's a Palestinian state. Afterwards, there were reports that, oh, hold on a second, Saudi Arabia is actually willing to have an agreement, even if there is no Palestinian state, but so long as Israel has a ceasefire with Gaza. Saudis later on denied. Iran was heavily involved in the picture. The looming threat of Iran could still be a contributing factor to decisions being made today, or of course lack thereof, you know, in terms of response, Iranian response or lack thereof. This is a looming threat. It's important, and it can play a very big part because Israel suffered huge blows coming from Iran. So all of them are connected. And if the situation in Gaza tones down, the other fronts, despite them having their own special elements and then it's their own unique situation, they have a very high likelihood of coming down too. Because if we take as an example Yemen is a front that has been open purely for Gaza. So Ansarullah declared many times, and still do, that their attacks are there to stop the genocide in Gaza and lift the blockade of Gaza. And once that happens, they stop. And indeed, they have, like we have seen when the recent ceasefire took effect. However, when Israel decided to breach that ceasefire, they started to attack again.